You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify, and like Stables Media on Facebook. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there. And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast Primetime Edition on Stables Media. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith and Darren Weiss. Frank Basner is out, at least temporarily. He may join us later in this episode. But Ed, we'll start with you. How was your week and how are you doing?
Week was going well. Thanks for asking, Taylor. It went very well due to the fact that the Lions were not playing this past Sunday, so that gave me good reason to rest. Unfortunately, that has to come to an end, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars next, and we'll preview that right before our closing statement. Darren, how about yourself?
Hey, it was good, guys. You know, for the first time, we had NFL 4 days this week. We had NFL more days than we didn't. So that was kind of cool to have a little bit, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and obviously Sunday. But I'm good, and I'm happy to be back with you guys, and it's good to hear from you guys.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Same here.
Now, before we begin, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports app called VigIt, which influences more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S at the beginning of the word. STABLES. That's the VigIt app in 2 words. Either that or in 1 word, one or the other. Download the VigIt app and enter the referral code STABLES. Got some Red Wings to talk about, plus a little Tigers news and some Big Ten news and a little NBA news. And that does include our Pistons, but it doesn't involve them. Plus our TMSTP story vault on Piston owner Tom Gores from Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag. And then, like I mentioned before, we'll preview the Lions and Jacksonville Jaguars, Saxonville. It is on the road Sunday at 1 on Fox. So let's get to it with our What's Your Great segment. The Red Wings were busy. Steve Yzerman not wasting too much time. He signed veteran forward Bobby Ryan from the Ottawa Senators to a 1-year, $1 million contract. And we're going to go in chronological order. Ed, we'll start with you. Bobby Ryan from the Ottawa Senators. What is your grade on it?
My grade for Bobby Ryan, I will give it a C+. Due to the fact that knowing the production that Bobby Ryan had last year for his position specifically gives you low expectations of what he can give to the team for this upcoming season. But I think with this move, at least as well as with some of the other moves that Yzerman has made so far, it's not necessarily for production purposes. I think it's more to establish a veteran presence as well as mentorship potentially for some of the young players to not only look up to, but also, well, not necessarily look up to, but to learn from and gain advice from, and on how to adjust themselves, and so that they themselves can grow as better players. So I think that's one reason why, at least for this specific signing of this player, Yzerman will be looking for. All part of his plan, of course, but he had a different mode and a different vision. But for this one, I'm going to give it a C+.
All right, Darren, how about you? What's your grade?
You know, I like this a lot more than Ed might seem to. I'm going to give it a B+, and I'll tell you why. Bobby Ryan has regressed over the last couple years, but reasons I like this deal, one of which Ed brought up, a veteran presence, has been around the league a long time, very well respected. I don't know if you guys knew this. He spent a year of his youth here. He played for the prestigious Honey Baked team back in the early 2000s, so he's familiar with the area. And also, you get him for 1 year, so he has a rebound year. He has a good year. Yzerman could trade him for a second or third round draft pick to a team that might need a third line forward, going into the playoff stretch. So, I like this deal. We're going to be a way more competitive team than last year. There's just no doubt about that.
Definitely. So I'm going to give this one, how about a mid-range B just to range it? So Bobby Ryan, Ed gives him a C+, Darren gives him a B+, I'll give him a mid-range B. On to John Merrill from the Vegas Golden Knights, a defenseman. Yzerman signed him to a one-year $925,000 deal, and a little bit cheaper, very cheap nonetheless. Darren, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll turn it to Ed. Darren, what's your grade on John Merrill, the defenseman?
I like it. It's a B. He's a solid. The Wings like these big, heavy shot defensemen. John Merrill comes in at 6'3", 6'4", 28 years old. He's played for a winning team the last couple years with Vegas, and he moves the puck really well. He holds on to the puck. He doesn't. I've watched some of his highlights. He's very good. In the neutral zone. On the attack even, and, maybe power play too. So I like this deal, and, defense was a pressing need. We got rid of Eriksson, and we needed a big body. So it looks like in terms of that, we replaced it right there with a big body in Merrill.
Definitely a fact. Ed, what is your grade on defenseman John Merrill from the Vegas Golden Knights?
I'm going to go B- simply because of the fact that I want to see how his game and his production translates to how Blashill might run under his system and how he schemes things from a different game plan and strategic standpoint. Also, the fact that it does help knowing that he has played on a competitive team, so he knows a thing about winning enough games, making that playoff run, so he can bring that experience. So to say, if say the Wings are in a potential spot where they're fighting for a playoff spot, you have that noted experience from Merrill and what he brings to the table, so that can help out a lot too. Production, like what Darren was mentioning about the other areas, how he affects the game, that's also nice to see because the Wings were sorely lacking in a lot of areas. And granted, not one player is going to plug up a whole system or a whole myriad of problems, but it is nice to know that what you're getting in Merrill, you could plug in here, plug in there, in terms of different rotations for whatever you're rolling out, whether it be first line, third line, or even on the PK or power play.
Right. I'm going to give this one a mid-range B. You touched on Jeff Blashill, Ed. Jeff Blashill, I doubt he has a scheme. I doubt he has a single scheme. Jeff Blashill's still a beginner type of head coach in the National Hockey League. He's still like AHL head coach caliber.
And again, depending on how Blashill uses him will affect greatly, in my view, what his production output could potentially be. Same thing that I had about in terms of that I felt in regards to the signing of Ryan.
Yeah, and then we got goaltender Thomas Greiss from the New York Islanders signing with the Red Wings to a 2-year, $7.2 million contract. Greiss is a really good goaltender, and he's going to replace Jimmy Howard. Ed, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, what is your grade on goaltender Thomas Greiss?
My comment on Greiss is, well, first of all, my grade is definitely a B, and probably a B plus as well. I think Greiss, he brings not only quality backup spot, let's say if he were to be the backup for Bernier, but I think also he brings a potential competition, I think, because we've seen his numbers over the past couple of years. I think he had a 9.91 save percentage this past season at only 2.74 goals against. So again, adequate, more than adequate to be not only a backup goaltender, but I think potentially compete for a starting goaltender spot. And Bernier isn't exactly setting the world on fire either. So until, let's say, you get that next goalie prospect in a draft or you see a looming goaltender on the free agency market, this is the best plan that you could do at this point. So for this signing, I got no problem with it. And knowing that you needed an upgrade because Jimmy Howard's best days were long behind him, I more than approve of this pick. So, or rather the signing. So I think B, but more than likely, I'm probably leaning towards B+.
Yeah, I would pick a B+ too. Darren, would you agree?
Yeah, I'm right there, B+. This is a guy that is a short-term solution. He's not, we're going to plug him in for a year or two. He'll probably end up splitting time, I would say, close to 50-50 with Bernier. And something I like about Greiss is that he has German descent. So, Moritz Seider coming up, hopefully some of that German, background will ease Moritz Seider into the lineup and make him feel comfortable with a German goaltender. Just, I'm throwing things at a wall here, seeing if anything sticks. But
that's not a bad theory.
Yeah, don't overlook those things.
Young players need camaraderie, and sometimes having a fellow foreigner or a fellow countryman, I should say, on the same team as you makes things a little less lonely, which in turn could make your mind at ease, will allow you to perform better on the ice. So
right, just a little bit more comfortable,
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then number 4 of 5 signings here, defenseman Troy Stecher from the Vancouver Canucks to a 2-year, $3.4 million contract. Darren, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll turn over to Ed. Darren, what is your grade on defenseman Troy Stecher from the Vancouver Canucks?
My grade is probably, I'm going to go B-, just because I thought we gave him a little bit more money than I wanted to of. Detroit does have the cap space to overpay for guys. Originally, I thought Troy was a little older. I thought he was 28, 29. I found out he was only 26, so that makes me like the signing more. He's a right-handed shot, something that Detroit has long needed in the defense pairings. He's 5'10". He doesn't have tremendous size, but he's quick. He moves the puck well. He will occasionally, he will get you 5 goals a year. And he's usually a plus player. At least last year he was plus 10. So, I like this signing for the next 2 years. And, maybe going forward he's a top 6 defenseman. I think that's sort of what Yzerman's, can he be maybe a third-line defenseman on a playoff team? And, I guess we'll find that out in the next 2 seasons.
All right. Ed, what is your grade on defenseman Troy Stecher?
My grade is similar to Darren's, probably a high C+, if not low B-. I think this is also done for depth purposes as well, because you obviously need more than one defenseman out there. And knowing that you just got rid of Eriksson, you know the old saying, sometimes you need 2 to fix up 1. So with the signing of Ryan, and then now with this, doesn't surprise me that they needed at least depth purposes in terms of that as well. And there's other things as well that come to mind in terms of what he could bring to the table. But in terms of on the surface, again, I see him more so low ceiling, but a moderate, not ceiling, but low floor, moderate ceiling. Not a high ceiling, but a moderate enough ceiling. I think where this is a signing where you might pay a little bit too much money, but it's like a low risk, high reward type of scenario where if he does well, you got what you paid for, and then some. If he doesn't, don't worry about it. He'll be off the books in a couple years anyways.
Right. So your grade is a C.
It's in between C+ and B-. I'll probably lean towards, I want to be proven wrong, so I'm going to say C+.
All right. I'm going to go C+ as well. And then finally, center Vladislav Namestikov from the Colorado Avalanche to a 2-year, $4 million contract. Namestikov worked under Yzerman as general manager for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the past, guys. And he came from the Colorado Avalanche, also from another team, I can't remember. But anyway, I think it's a good signing there, Namestikov to Detroit. So, Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, what's your grade on Namestikov?
My grade is a B+. I like the fact that Yzerman decided to go with a more familiarity, which I think is expected. Whenever you're a general manager or anyone in front office coming from a previous team or franchise to a new one, you want to ground yourself with some elements of home as best as you can. Obviously, you can take it too far in some certain cases, case in point, the Lions, but if you do it on a more subtle approach, it could be quite beneficial to you in the long run. Now, what we see here with the signing, Namestnikov, with the fact that he not only started his career with Yzerman and the Lightning, but he has local roots. He spent, or at least some measure of degree, he spent some of his childhood in Michigan. He has some ties to the Red Wings as well, because not only is he a son of a former defenseman himself, but he also is the nephew of, if guys, I want to see if you know this name or remember this name, Slava Kozlov.
There you go.
Sure do.
So I think that's a pretty cool and pretty neat fact to know. But also knowing the production that Namestnikov can give you. I think he had 4 goals and 5 points in 12 playoff games with the Avs, and that's an addition to not only what he did with Tampa, but he had some good tenure. He had a good couple seasons with the Rangers as well. So I think this is a definite, very good and very promising signing from Yzerman. He signed into a 2-year deal, and not just a 1 year. So this isn't a potential rental or 1 year rental type of scenario. So I think based on what could happen, I'm giving this a B+, but I really am positive and optimistic of what I think this deal could produce long term.
It's got a hell of a ring to it. Slava Namestikov, Slava Kozlov, both one and the same. Darren, what would you think? What's your grade on Slava Namestikov?
Yeah, I tend to go a little bit less than a B plus. I'm at a B, and I'll tell you why. He spent time with 3 different teams last year. He has shown the ability to put the puck in the back of the net. He's had 20 goals once. He came close last year. He had 17 in only probably 60 games. I still think he's growing as a player, and Yzerman has clearly known Namestikov for a long time, drafted him, which means he scouted him, which means he's known him for even longer. I think this is a guy that could give you between 30 and 40 points and just be competitive, Just add to the skill that we may not have had in the bottom 6 in terms of forwards on the Red Wings. So I think it's definitely an improvement. Can he be a top 6 forward? Yeah, maybe. Definitely a third-line forward, and he will definitely boost the third line, maybe even the second line. And he's very good in the face-offs. So I like it, and we'll see what we got. I think this is a big year. I think he's turning 28 this year, so it's not really like, he's a prospect anymore. He's not old, but, you're probably, what you get is what you're going to get from this guy, so...
He's got a little marinade to that seasoning.
Exactly. So it's not like we're waiting for him to put up, 60, 70 points. He's probably a 40-point player a year, and, teams need those guys. You have your 5th or 6th guy getting 40 points. That's you're going to be a pretty good team.
Plus, it's never too bad to have a streaky shooter or a streaky scorer at any point in time, especially in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And not to mention, you just mentioned faceoffs. Who's to say late in the game you need to win a crucial faceoff deep in your zone where you're defending a PK, or you're up by 1, or you're facing a 6-on-4 or a 6-on-5. You need to win those faceoffs for a reason. So having a guy like that in there could be very beneficial.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And if anything else, he'll drive the competition in camp, and he'll make other guys, if they want to play, they're going to have to, outwork this guy.
Yeah, and face-off wins get you more puck possession time, too. So there you go. All right. So that is our What's Your Grade segment, Red Wings edition. Now to some headlines. First off, the Tigers will get the 3rd pick in the 2021 MLB Draft. So, guys, the Tigers, who do you guys think they'll pick next year in 2021? Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Darren. Ed, what do you think?
Well, at the moment, I don't have any list of names or guys at the top of my head I could say, oh, wow, we got to get this guy. I mean, it helps that when you have a top 3 pick, virtually any of those blue chippers are available for you at first come, first serve glance. But I will say that, and will point out that if there's anything the Tigers need to do or need to improve upon, it's their needs, their positional needs. And I'm looking at immediate eyesores, not just only in the outfield, also with your pitching, particularly your starting pitching. And you need a more stable set either at behind catcher or behind first base. Now, more than likely, Spencer Turnbull, that's your first baseman of the future. Miguel Cabrera is going to continue his transition to a DH for the remainder of his contract. So you may be more inclined to pick a catcher. If you can find a catcher out there that knows a thing or two about working behind first base, great. If not, that's not the main goal. Now, in terms of what I think could be the more potential pick that they use, it's either going to be a starting pitcher or an outfielder, because I think between what Christian Stewart has done, in addition to my guy, Jacoby Jones, putting in his effort, I think you need another outfielder in there, another corner outfielder in there to help balance things out, because ever since JD Martinez left, that position has been a barren wasteland for the Tigers. So that's definitely, in my view, if I was in that war room, I would be putting at the top of my list, we need an outfielder. This team has a lot of needs, but I think chiefly among them would be either an outfielder or better help in the starting rotation, because Casey Mize is not going to do it by himself. He's going to need more help.
Yeah, good points. Darren?
Yeah, so, the Tigers are in such a rebuild, and, they need so many things. I think it's more so you take the best player available. Now, there's 2 pitchers from Vanderbilt that are supposed to go top 4. One of them, this Kumar Rocker, he's going to go 1-1. He's going to go to Pittsburgh with the first overall pick. So that leaves a pitcher or, I did a little bit of research. You have a high school shortstop, and then you have a outfielder out of Florida, and then you have that second pitcher from Vanderbilt. My personal take, I never think a team can have enough arms. If you have 5 starting pitchers in the minors that are prospects, I think you're lucky if 2 pan out. With that being said, we have no position players, infielders, shortstops of the future. And you look at guys like Carlos Carrera or Francisco Lindor. If this high schooler has the potential of one of those guys, I think you need to take him. So I like the shortstop, or I never go wrong with a pitcher. But I like some of the outfielders we have in the minors, especially I'm blanking on his name. Who'd we draft last year? Not Austin. 2 years ago, who was the outfielder?
2 years ago, I was an outfielder, right? Austin somebody. It's not Austin Roma. He's a catcher.
For some reason, the name Austin Thatch keeps appearing to me, but I don't think that's it.
Austin Meadows, maybe?
Yeah, that would be...
I don't think it was Austin Meadows, but regardless, I think the Tigers need a pitcher or a shortstop. So, best player available, and I think we'll see what happens. By the way, Riley Green is who I'm thinking of.
Okay, that's the guy.
Oh, yeah, that was an outfielder, yeah. Riley Green.
Definitely agree with Darren at the very least. We can at least compromise and say that, hey, if there's a pitcher available and he's the best guy available, you take him. Because I've always heard the saying, pitching is the name of the game. There's a reason Jim Price had said for years and years and years there's an art to pitching. And, well, we've seen it. You can take a guy, literally put him on the mound, say, hey, can you give me 7, 8, 9 innings of just good, solid work, whether it be a crucial game, playoffs, World Series, whatever. It's always so valuable to have that in the back of your pocket. There's a reason why, which is why, it was so, there was a hot debate, or why there was great advocacy from people why Justin Verlander deserved his 2011 MVP. When you have a guy like that, yeah, he goes once every 5 days. But if you take a guy and say, hey, this is going to be our horse, take it easy, as long as we put in our effort, give him support, run support, we'll be fine. It's so stress relieving to have. You have no idea. So definitely not in disagreement with Darren in terms of when it comes to say, hey, if you want to start another starting pitcher, grab one.
Yep. Definitely. And then we have college football news. The Big Ten has released its football schedule, and we're going to go over those schedules for Michigan State and Michigan right now. We'll start with Michigan. The Wolverines, they're at Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, Saturday, October 24th at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. Then the Paul Bunyan Trophy game, MSU at Michigan at the Big House on Saturday, October 3rd. Michigan at Indiana, home against Wisconsin, at Rutgers, home against Penn State, home against Maryland, and then at Ohio State, December 12th on Fox at noon. For the Spartans, they are home against Rutgers at noon on October 24th on BTN. Then they're at Michigan, like I mentioned before, and then at Iowa, home against Indiana, at Maryland, home against Northwestern, home against Ohio State on December 5th, and at Penn State, number 9 on December 12th. So, guys, we can't wait until the college football season starts, but it's only a 7-game conference season, and that's it. So, Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Darren. Ed, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts, first and foremost, I like that Minnesota game because I think it's P.J. Fleck he's coaching, so we're going to get the coaching matchup of Harbaugh versus Fleck, which is going to be entertaining alone. Saturday night primetime game, which probably means we'll be getting Herb Street and Fowler in the booth, which is big national TV audience. And I believe this is going to be a lot of people's introduction to Joe Milton as the starting quarterback. I may be getting ahead of myself, but I believe that is the general consensus. He's going to be our starter. He's going to be our QB1, at least to start the season, especially now that Dylan McCaffrey had transferred recently. So that means the job is all but Milton. So I want to see how he does on the road, first time start. Gives you a little bit of a parallel to what Shea Patterson had to go through in his first game for Michigan on the road at night against Notre Dame. So I want to see how Milton does in that aspect. Now, it is interesting to note that the MSU game is going to be right up after that instead of a little bit later. But again, with circumstances being the way it is, it didn't seem too right to have it. If you're going to have it, you got to have it where it's at. It is interesting to note that originally we saw some earlier drafts of what the season schedule could look like, and it had Michigan and Ohio State playing in the middle of the season. Now, as we see here in terms of the official schedules, it's been moved back to the end of the schedule, which I'm fine with. It is the tradition. It is, and depending on how things will go, it will more than likely determine who's going to win the Big Ten East Division. So again, there's nothing new here in terms of with that rivalry, but I'm not going to get my hopes up anything because we've all seen what's happened now for the past 2 decades. So I'll get more excited if I feel they have a better shot at winning that game, which I don't think they do at this time, especially that's going to be in Columbus. Crowds or no crowds, I don't care. OSU is the better team right now. They've been a better program now for decades for a reason why. They've consistently shown it and proven it to us. So until we beat them, I ain't saying crap about that. Other than that, it's a doable schedule, one where if you get some luck, get some breaks, beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, handle your business in the pressure moments, whether it be Mini, whether it be Whiskey, whether it be Penn State, and of course Ohio State, it leaves you, I don't think they're going to make the playoff because I think,
And Michigan State.
Yeah, and MSU as well.
Mel Tucker.
I don't think Michigan is going to be a playoff caliber team, especially with the changeover that they have from last year to this year. But, they can always see themselves as a potential Big Ten dark horse because everybody's picking Penn State, everybody's picking Wisconsin, everybody's picking Ohio State. I think Michigan can find themselves as a potential dark horse if they get to that last game of the year with Ohio State, if they're within a good spot to where they can, where they're competing for that division crown. It's always likely. But again, until I have further and full confidence that they can hang around and not just not just beat Ohio State, at least hang around, not get blown out by 30, 40 points again, then I'd be feeling more optimistic. But at this point, I don't.
Right. Darren, what say you?
I'm excited that we have football. We're in a weird time right now, and playing only the Big Ten schedule, 7-8 games. It's going to be interesting. No cupcake games in the beginning of the year against North Texas or Central or Eastern Michigan or Army or whoever. We're not going to know much about any of these teams going into next weekend. Joe Milton supposedly looks very good. He put on 20 pounds of muscle, but I mean, those are Michigan coaches saying that he looks very good, so take that with a grain of salt. We still don't know who the starting quarterback is for Michigan State. Is it going to be Rocky Lombardi, Theo Day? I still think Ohio State's the team to beat just because year in and year out, they just recycle talent. They recycle recruits, and they reload.
They don't rebuild. They reload.
They reload, exactly, and they're always ready to go. They're just faster, stronger, and more physical than the rest of the conference. But it should be interesting. I think, I think the passing game, sort of like in baseball, how pitching takes a little bit longer than hitting. I think that the passing game is going to take a little bit longer to get going than the running game. That's just because, quarterbacks and centers with their reps and their timing and a whole bunch of different things. But P.J. Fleck's a really good coach.
And not to mention, pardon the interruption, not to mention what we've seen with Harbaugh with his offensive game plans and his schemes the past couple of years. When he gets into a habit, when he gets dead set on it, he's going to be running the football on you. Harbaugh loves to run the football, and he wants to be that powerful, physical team up in your face. So what better way to do that is to establish the running game, which will help get your easier quarterback into things, help set up play action, those type of scenarios and those type of things. So still expect Harbaugh to be more run first with this approach, but I would like to see utilize Milton's strengths, use his athleticism, and say, hey, if he's got 20 more pounds on him, put it to use. Design some plays for him, some quarterback runs, some power runs, I should say.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Basically, make him your Cam Newton.
I agree. Put him in the best position to succeed. He's got a dart of an arm, and he likes to move. He likes to, get out of the pocket, run some options, like you said. Give him, some designed, off-tackle run plays.
And some RPOs.
Yeah, let him play to his strengths. And he likes to throw the ball downfield. Let him air it out. Michigan has been so conservative over the years. They've had such strong wide receivers and Tarek Black and Donovan Peoples-Jones, and they never want to take these deep shots downfield. So
even though you've had, and this goes back to Lloyd, okay?
Right.
Lloyd Carr.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness! Even when you had Braylon Edwards and Mario Manningham, you didn't really see Lloyd air it out as much as he did. Now, granted, it helped that you had guys like Chris Perry and guys like Mike Hart coming through and Anthony Thomas coming through your program, for year after year. But when you have versatile, outstanding, talented wideouts, use them. But they didn't.
Exactly. Let them get in space. Let them get in space and let them do what they do best. And I don't know why they haven't done that. Nico Collins was another guy. So it'll be interesting. There's only 7 games.
I'll say this. It probably wouldn't be a surprise. It wasn't to see this because it was his system. But Rich Rod had no problem airing the ball out. even Brady Hoke, of all people, had no problem airing the ball out. And that was with not just Devin Gardner, but with Denard.
Who couldn't throw the ball.
Right. Denard passing was not his strength. And Hoke still draw plays like, okay, Denard, drop back, throw the ball up, see what's going to happen.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting. 7 games. There's not a lot of time to try things. You got to go out and you got to win. You got to attack and you got to play to your players' strengths.
And to me, this will probably be the best thing for Harbaugh because there's really no high expectations for everyone that anyone has had for you. So if you pull off a run, you win some games, and dare I say it, if you beat Ohio State. Now, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team because I think there's going to be too many teams that are better than Michigan that would more than deserve that spot. Mm-hmm. But if you want to say, hey, if you want to have at least one damn accomplishment under the Harbaugh era, how about winning the Big Ten division? How about playing in a Big Ten championship game? How about winning a Big Ten title?
You got to get to a Big Ten championship game.
You got to get to Indy. And, and if you win it, hey, hello, you're in Pasadena. Do you know how long I've been waiting to see this team go to another Rose Bowl?
Too long.
Oh.
Way too long. And Brady Hoke, speaking of which, was the last Michigan football head coach to beat Ohio State.
Ugh.
That was back in 2011.
Which seems like literally forever ago. That's our only 2 wins this century. That one and the 100th game in 2003. That was senior day with Chris Perry, and I think Edwards, I think he played in 04, but that was Chris Perry's senior day, with his Heisman campaign, the 100th game, and we won that game, I believe, either win a share or win the Big Ten outright to go to a Rose Bowl. That was one of, outside of 04 and 06, that was one of the last times we've been to a Rose Bowl. So I want to get back to that, but again, unless I see a scenario where we have a legit shot at beating Ohio State, I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Yep. So we're just under a half hour left. Got one headline to get out of the way, and then we'll go into our story vault, and finally we'll preview Lions and Jaguars. The NBA's 2021 regular season will be targeted for January 18th. Commissioner Adam Silver will give 8 weeks notice ahead of time, and that includes our Detroit Pistons. And speaking of the Pistons, it's time for our TMSTP Story Vault. That involves Pistons owner Tom Gores. Good segue there. From Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag on February 20th, 2014, headlining Tom Gores has no effing clue. Moss writes, unfortunately for Detroit sports fans, incompetent and historically bad team ownership isn't something we are unfamiliar with. The last few painful years of the Norris family running the Red Wings into the ground, Mike Ilitch's dereliction of duty during the son of Tal Smith Japanese bank debt era, which culminated in a humiliating 119-loss season in 2003, for the Tigers, that is. Bill Davidson's refusal to pay the luxury tax, former Pistons owner, which probably would have secured a second title in the aught. His widow Karen publicly defecating all over Mr. D's last will and testament in ignoring her deceased sugar daddy's husband's succession plan for his beloved Pistons. And I haven't even mentioned that the city's football team has been managed for 6 decades by the worst owner in the history of professional sports. And this is a long one, guys, so bear with me. So while complete ineptitude is not new, it does not make it any more palatable that the current owner of the Detroit Pistons might be as ineffectual and in over his head as any Motor City franchise owner in history who doesn't have a direct lineage to the assembly line and Nazi sympathizing. Yes, Tom Gores is that bad. If you needed any more evidence of his utter incompetence, look no further than the passage of today's NBA trade deadline at 3 p.m. and Greg Monroe, Rodney Stuckey, and Joe Dumars were still employed by this absentee landlord. It is truly unfathomable that the Pistons allowed the deadline to come and go while standing pat. After back-to-back losses to the Charlotte Bobcats, the Pistons currently reside in the sweet, wet spot of abject 2013-2014 failure, missing the postseason while forfeiting their first-round pick. They currently have the 10th worst record in the league, and they need to get an 8th worst and not suffer any bad lottery luck to the same team that humiliated them over the last 2 days. This billionaire buffoon who currently owns this team isn't much different than a deer standing in the middle of the road while an SUV quickly approaches. Go left quickly and you live. Move to the right and the vehicle misses. Stand in the middle of the road, you miss out on your foolish goal of qualifying for the postseason, and you sit idly by as Michael Jordan swipes your first-round pick in one of the most anticipated drafts in NBA history. And before we delve any deeper into Gores' bumbling management of this franchise, let's first discuss how the Pistons are in this purgatorial predicament in the first place. Instead of using their amnesty bestowed upon them fortuitously by the lax collective bargaining agreement To exercise the Ben Gordon contract abomination, Gores refused to utilize his get-out-of-jail-free card and instead sent a protected first-round pick to Charlotte as a means to rid himself of the two guards' albatross deal. This point cannot be stressed enough. The Pistons wouldn't be in this awful catch-22 situation if Gores had just authorized the amnesty. Like, can you imagine walking into a Best Buy store with a $1,000 gift card, buying a new 60-inch HD TV and paying with cash? Well, that's basically what Gores did in refusing to use his amnesty, with a qualifier that the TV purchase left the electronic shopper flat broke. And why did Gores refuse to amnesty Gordon? Well, we haven't received a direct answer from Arabic, tanned, and open-shirted Mitt Romney yet, but his stooges in the media have informed us that Gores is morally opposed to paying someone not to do a job. I've heard Matt Derry and the bought and paid for Vincents, such as Vincent Goodwill or Vincent Goodchill, provide this as a reason the team is one of only 10 NBA franchises not to use their Men in Black memory eraser. That's why he didn't amnesty Gordon, and that's why Charlie Villanueva still rots at the end of the Pistons bench. Gores is morally opposed to it. The same guy who wasn't morally conflicted when his own brother's wife, while he himself was married, somehow couldn't stomach paying Ben Gordon to play somewhere else. And your sister-in-law, I don't see the problem in that. Paying Charlie Villanueva while he lounges on a beach in Turks and Caicos? Well, we can't have that. And while it might not quite match William Clay Ford Sr.'s stubborn refusal to fire his golfing buddy Matt Millen while the team's fans were organizing protest marches and chanting "Fire Millen" at Wings and Tigers games, Gores has been on a prodigious run of stupidity. First, he refused to fire the man who, just since 2008, traded Chauncey Billups for a washed-up Allen Iverson, gave away Aaron Aflalo, famously overpaid Gordon and Villanueva, handed way too lavish extensions to Richard Hamilton and Tayshaun Prince, overpaid Jonas Jerebko, Rodney Stuckey, and Jason Maxwell, then excreted 2014 Smith, Brandon Jennings, Billups, cap poop bisque, which means not only that did they decimate the going to work Pistons era, trading Chauncey Billups for Allen Iverson guys, and then Richard Hamilton and Tayshaun Prince hit the road. Ben Wallace was traded to the Chicago Bulls. But let's continue on here. Okay, I don't want to go all Shia LaBeouf on you here. That last paragraph was lifted from a Bill Simmons column this week that rightfully eviscerated Joe Dumars. Instead of dismissing Dumars after the 2012-2013 season, Gores made the biggest mistake that any professional sports owner could make. He gave a lame duck GM, who was a national joke and now synonymous with signing bad free agents, cap space, and a make the playoffs or else edict. That's like giving your toddler a lighter and some kerosene and being shocked when your next calls to your insurance agent and the burn unit at U of M Hospital. Like, do you know how they have those rookie conferences for newly drafted players where they bring in ex-jocks to advise them that raping girls and drinking and driving are probably not good life choices? And let's pause there. We'll go over to Ed and then Darren first before we continue on. Not only did the going to work Pistons era get decimated by Tom Gores, he started overpaying other players like Jonas Jerebko, Ben Gordon, Charlie Villanueva, and others. Ed, just one bad mistake after another. Go ahead.
This is about, now you mentioned Tom Gores, but those moves you just described remind me or make me think, wasn't that happening under Joe Dumars' regime in his last years with the team?
I believe so.
Yeah, because so that speaks, unfortunately, to one reason why this franchise in the state of it's in was because of those unfortunate contracts of Joe Dumars. Granted, he's always going to be known in Piston lore forever, not just for making the moves that he did make as general manager that brought this team a championship, trading for Ben Wallace, trading for Rasheed, drafting Tayshaun, getting Chauncey when nobody else wanted him. That became gold. Obviously, with his work as a player, it goes without saying. But you have to acknowledge that there was a lot of bad that Joe Dumars did, and the constant draft whiffs was quite infuriating and beyond annoying to see. So, unfortunately, things haven't gotten too much better in the Gores era. Like, we saw the Stan Van Gundy experiment. Maybe Stefanski will have something better. That's why we had this process the way it was for the past couple of years. Now he's got his guy in place. But it's quite unfortunate knowing that this was a team that went from being one of the most consistent contenders year in and year out to an absolute laughingstock in record time was just quite sad, really.
Yeah. Darren, what say you?
Detroit is some of the worst sports owners, the four main sports. I mean, we have probably the worst owners in all of sports, and it's getting really tiring. Tom Gores has no interest in the Pistons. He bought it as strictly a business venture. He bought it for something like $350 million. It's already worth over $1 billion, so he's already tripled his money. And, he shows up to 2 games a year. He gets drunk, and he thinks he's interacting with the fans when he throws out free T-shirts. He was buddy-buddy with Andre Drummond, and he stopped Stan Van from trading him a few times. I'm tired of it. We need to get somebody in here. Tom, you bought the team to eventually sell it to make a profit. You're going to make a profit. Sell it to somebody in the Detroit area who cares, okay? I mean, he doesn't want to spend money on any free agents. Not that, we're going to get Chris Paul to come live in Birmingham, Michigan, but you're going to have to overpay for probably B-level free agents to get them here, and I don't even think he wants to do that. So I don't really know what he thinks going on. I really like, the new GM Weaver. He did some really nice things in Oklahoma City. Hopefully, we have to, going forward, get lucky and hit on somebody in the draft. And from there, maybe Siako turns out okay, but Tom Gores has no interest. He doesn't care if this team wins or not. If he cared, he'd be at more games, he'd be more hands-on and all of that. So that's my thoughts on that. And, I'm a huge basketball guy, and I'd love to get the Pistons back to where they were, in the early Dumars days. And that's my thoughts on Gores for the most part.
And those are facts right there, too. Tom Gores is a crazy guy. Continuing on here, there's more. If they had a similar symposium for owners, I'm guessing the Maloof brothers would give a lecture that the worst possible thing you could do is tell an executive with 1 year left on his contract that he had to make the postseason or else. And that's before you throw into the mix that qualifying for the playoffs only get annihilated by the Heat or the Pacers would result in you forfeiting your first-round pick in the deepest draft in years. What was Gores thinking when he issued that decree? That the city of Detroit would magically become re-enamored with this team if they squeaked into the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed in the putrid Eastern Conference? Was he under the impression that hordes of affluent Oakland County residents would hearken back to the old days, grab their mink coats from their cedar closets, and rush back to the palace like it was the late 80s, if only his franchise could become a sacrificial lamb against Miami or Indiana? Because the only way this team would advance to the second round would be if a meteor hit the Townsend Hotel while the Pacers were waiting for Game 3 to begin after taking a 2-0 series late in Indianapolis. The no-brainer was to fire Dumars after last season, hire a new GM, which would have bought the team some time with fans dying for Joe D to get shown the door, and regroup after hopefully getting a top 8 pick this summer. Instead, Gores allowed Dumars to hire another head coach in Maurice Cheeks, who didn't even make it to the All-Star break, and make a bunch of off-season moves with a Kyle Singler goal of making the playoffs this year. Was the Platinum Equity CEO shocked when Dumars made a bunch of short-sighted transactions in an obvious attempt to pacify his boss and keep his gig, while Gores was the one who gave him that blueprint in the first place? Which brings us to the Pistons accomplishing absolutely nothing, as today's 3 p.m. trade deadline came and went with Monroe and Stuckey still on the roster. I've had a working theory since Cheeks was dismissed by Gores or the protestations of Dumars that Joe D is no longer really the GM of the Pistons. Furthermore, if Dumars had a respected second in command like John Hammond or Scott Perry, number 4 would have already been fired. That's Joe Dumars. Do you even know who Dumars' assistant GM is at this point? It's George David or Larry Costanza. I forget which one. Anyway, it would appear that the only reason why Dumars hasn't been given a pink slip by Gores yet is that Dan Quayle insulated himself at least until the season ends. How else can you explain the team's inactivity at the deadline when they had 2 extremely marketable trade chips? In Stuckey, not only did you have an attractive expiring contract, but a 6-man who could actually help a team this season. And instead of attempting to deal Monroe before his notorious agent, David Falk lands a max contract in Atlanta or in some other NBA city that is willing to overpay the unathletic, defensively challenged big man. The team sat on its hands and now finds itself in the unenviable position of either losing Monroe for nothing or having to match an outlandish offer. The Lions' current contract conundrum with Ndamukong Suh looks tenable by comparison. Before Gores overruled his GM and fired Cheeks, there was league-wide speculation that both Monroe and Stuckey could be had. Monroe himself admitted to being bothered by the rampant rumors, but after Gores clipped Dumars nuts 11 days ago, basically telling the world that his GM was no longer in charge, various league sources said that all the Pistons trade chatter stopped. Dumars went radio silent until this morning when there were whispers that the team was shopping Josh Smith. And not just for dead contract weight in order to rid themselves of Method Man's 4-year, $54 million contract, but for actual assets. And this tweet was from ESPN's senior NBA writer Zach Lowe on Twitter at ZachLowe_NBA. He wrote, other teams say Pistons indeed shopping Josh Smith, but demanding more than just debt expiring. So let's pause right there. Josh Smith signed to a... I know. Huge overpaid contract.
Just saying those two names make me want to throw up my dinner. God.
Yeah, and Josh Smith couldn't even hit a damn free throw.
Are we finally free from his contract, or are we still paying him dead money?
I think we got off the books this year. And
Thank God.
Oh,
yeah.
God. The funny thing is,
I think that was a year or two ago.
Right. The funny thing was, the league was going smaller and trying to, stretch fours, and the Pistons were the only team that went bigger with Drummond, Monroe, and Josh Smith, thinking that would work. Let's pack the middle, they said.
Yeah, it's like the Sixers drafting nothing but centers for like 4 or 5 years in a row.
Right.
God.
Oh, man. And, since he left the Pistons, he barely had a cup of coffee in the league after that. He floated around.
He was virtually never seen from again.
Right. He's had a cup of coffee in Houston. He sat down at a table for lunch and, with the Clippers, and after that, it was over.
Yeah. I can't wait until Urinating Tree does his own video of him, and that includes Josh Smith. I'm thinking a Pistons collapse from championship to 0. Now, continuing on, who dropped that lead trial balloon while working the phone lines for Gores? Dennis Mannion, Mark Barnhill, that overweight kid who dances in the palace aisles? Seriously, it would appear that the Pistons approached the most important trade deadline date they've had in years with a dead man walking general manager who is fully aware that his days are numbered. And if you don't believe me, check out this Twitter conversation I had with MLB Pistons beat writer David Mayo this morning. David said on Twitter, at David_Mayo, at Jeff Moss DSR, maybe a lack of motivation to pick up the phone on behalf of someone for whom you'll work only a few more months, unquote. A guy who covers this team for a living is publicly speculating that Joe D has already packed it in. You gotta believe me. Hey, why improve the Pistons when your agent, Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN, probably already has your next gig lined up anyway, especially if that new job is a current division rival. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a GM vacancy. Would it surprise anyone if Dan Gilbert hired Dumars this offseason? He already did us a favor once by taking Fred McLeod off our hands. Remember when he was a play-by-play announcer for the Pistons on TV? Yeah, I do. Look, you can be angry at Joe Dumars all you want, and believe me, I'm disgusted with most of his recent moves, but a lot of this has been set in motion by an owner who is completely out of his element. This dude is freaking clueless. I mean, does the guy even remotely look like a sports fan? Not to me, he doesn't. Oh, my God. He looks just like a drunk that just runs everywhere, except he doesn't go streaking like Will Ferrell in one movie. Bill Davidson resembled a sports fan. Mike Ilitch was an athlete himself. Tom Gores looks like he is ready to replace Danny Terrio at a moment's notice on a revival of Dance Fever. A sports fan would know not to rush the court after a meaningless preseason victory. A sports fan would have known that employing a lame duck GM with cap space and a win or you're fired approach is a toxic cocktail. For all the angst about Dumars, he will finally be gone soon enough. The real question is, how long will we be stuck with chest hair McGee calling the shots at 3 championship drive? Sorry, I don't count non-Pistons titles in the address. I will take my chances with Mail getting lost. There is real interest from potential investors to purchase the team and move it to downtown Detroit, which is Little Caesars Arena already. Wayne County executives are chomping at the bit to see this occur. How long must we wait before the venture capitalist flips this team? I am not sure there has ever been a more tumultuous ownership period in Detroit sports. The Pistons are run by a morally bankrupt venture capitalist who lives thousands of miles away and is probably biding his time until he can flip the team for a sizable profit. It would appear that Bill Ford Jr. is calling the shots in Allen Park, and his resume highlights including suggesting to his old man that the Lions hire Millen and Jim Caldwell. And the Red Wings are in a holding pattern while Mike Ilitch lives out his remaining days on the planet and Chris Ilitch makes plans to eventually sell the Tigers and Red Wings to fully concentrate on Little Caesars. The old lane fallback sports talk radio topic used to be, which Detroit sports team will be the next to win a championship? The prescient question would be, which will be the first to sell? Now, to recap this whole article, Tom Greiss is a total and complete lunatic of a human being, period. Especially when he rushes onto the court. After a buzzer beater in a preseason game, and then he rushed down to the court and got his picture taken with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond after a Pistons regular season win. I mean, come on. The Pistons, they made the playoffs in 2019, only to get swept by the Milwaukee Bucks. But still, Tom Greiss is just a crazy guy. We all agree on that, won't we?
Very eccentric, to say the least. The antics I could definitely do about is like he's trying to be a more jazzed up Mark Cuban, but with less controversial statements and remarks that gets him in trouble with the league. I don't get it. I think Greiss is someone who's I think he doesn't know exactly how to truly see how a basketball operation should look like. I think he should really only focus more on, hey, this team, only focus on what's affecting his bottom line. And if this team obviously had not been performing well the past couple of years, you weren't getting the seats filled out of Little Caesars Arena the way you wanted, hence you had to put on the black tarp on some of those seats. So I get the reason why Greiss should be concerned in that regard, especially when he had to witness up close how bad the team went, to a point to where it turned him off on Andre Drummond. That was the turning point that led to Drummond getting dealt to Cleveland. So I think it shows at least that Greiss has made some development, maybe has a little bit of an inkling of a clue, but I'm not optimistic that it's going to be a more consistent long-term thing from him doing that.
Right. Darren?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with everything that Ed said. He's just a total lunatic who's in over his head with this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. All right, one last thing we can get to, and then we'll go to our closing statement. Lions at Jacksonville Jaguars Sunday at 1 on Fox. Let's preview that. Any analysis, guys? We'll go to Ed Smith first, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, take the floor.
Yeah, my analysis, these are two bad teams that are already looking forward to the end of this season. But in a more serious aspect, this is obviously the Lions' first game after a bye week. I want to see what adjustments, if any, Matt Patricia and company made in terms of knowing how to set up your secondary, which has been absolutely piss poor throughout the first 4 games of this year. Put them in better spots, put them in better coverages, put them in better schemes and designs, which will further utilize their strengths, which obviously you're going to need that more of, since more than likely Desmond Trufant will not be available again for another consecutive game. But also, there's other things and other elements that I think which will help you get a win on a beleaguered Jacksonville team. One would be winning the time of possession. You saw how they got battered in that one stat by the Saints last week, or rather the week before, because A, they couldn't get off the field on third down, and B, their run defense was absolutely abysmal. So I think Leonard Fournette, is he playing? Is he not playing? Is he is he available for this week?
Not sure.
So that would be pretty, his status, I don't know. I can't think of it at the top of my head at the moment, but.
Oh, yeah, the practice report, yeah. Let me look that up. Continue on.
Yeah, but if he's available, that's going to be already one headache that the defense is going to have to deal with. Because with an established running game, Gardner Minshew can have some more pressure taken off of him to where he won't feel forced to try and make something happen, which will lead to a mistake. So if you're Detroit, you got to, A, get the stops on third down on defense, and B, hang on to the ball long enough to where you at least have a better shot at maximizing your possessions, even if necessarily they do the familiar theme of make some big plays but stall out near the end zone. At least get some points if you're going to have long, sustaining drives, which will, again, either chip away at a lead or put further distance between you and the other team. So that's crucially important in my view when it's time of possession. And also what's really important is this next stretch of games, because 3 of these next 4, they just went through that first quarter of their season. Now this is the next quarter. And 3 of these games of that next quarter are going to be on the road. Granted, situations and circumstances and atmosphere is going to be completely different for obvious reasons, but the mark of a good team or a good enough team or an adequate team is winning away from home, winning on the road. And to me, this represents your best shot at winning on the road in these next few games, because I think it's going to get tougher and tougher from here. I don't know what to expect with this team at this point. You know, they could go out there and score 28 points, and then they can go out the next week and score only 12 and look absolutely like dog crap in the process. So with this team, you never know. I expect this to be an entertaining game because it's two bad teams. So with that being said, I'd say let's go Jacksonville 24, Detroit 23.
All right. Before we go over to Darren, Ed, who would you say you were wondering if he's available?
Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. I don't see him on the practice Fournette.
Well, Leonard Fournette's on Tampa Bay.
Right. That's why I was making sure, because I didn't know if he was still on the team or they already moved him. So I needed that clarification. Thank you very much, Darren. I appreciate that. So at least that makes the defense's job at least easier in one aspect. But still, stopping the run and winning the time of possession is going to be very key.
Yeah, and the Lions can't do that. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. I agree with Ed. You know, the educational thought would be, well, okay, Detroit's coming off the bye. They should be well rested. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for Jacksonville. And normally, with normal teams, I would take them coming off the bye. But we're talking about a Matt Patricia team. So
we're not talking Andy Reid, okay?
We're not talking Mike Tomlin, right? So with that being said, you know, can they stop? You know, Gardner Minshew, I think he's a gamer. He's a game manager. He's not going to light you up for 450 yards. But with that being said, every quarterback seems to have a career day against Matt Patricia's defense. So DeAndre Swift healthy. Is Kerryon Johnson going to see snaps? I expect the Lions to win, but I think it's going to be a really close one-possession game that comes down to the end. I'll say Detroit 27, Jacksonville 21.
All right. I'm going to go with the Jaguars 26 and the Lions 24. 26-24 Saxonville, as Urinating Tree would call them. The Lions may have a better chance to win when they're playing Jacksonville, whether it's on the road. There's probably not going to be a crowd still in Jacksonville, Florida, but so be it. It's still going to be a close game nonetheless. Hunter Bryant and Desmond Trufant still did not practice earlier this past Wednesday. Christian Jones, C.J. Moore, Frank Ragnow, limited practice. Deshaun Hand and Nick Williams, full practice. So the Lions may get those two players back, but still, I'm going to have my doubts and still go with Jacksonville 26-24. The Lions are probably going to drop to 1-4, which is probably good for their tank. So that is Lions football. And now we go to the closing statement. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Darren. Ed, closing statement.
The theme for my closing statement this week would be accountability and leadership. I'm going to take you back a few months ago, right? This whole pandemic, everything was going as crazy as it is now. We didn't know what was going on, what's the plan, what's the protocol, what's the procedure. And what we saw was, after great evaluation and also careful consideration and paying attention to what the doctors and what science was saying, was, hey, if you have this element, if you have this involved, if you do this, you can resume certain business, you can resume essentials, you can resume sports if need be. We saw what the UFC was able to do, and then that blossomed into what the NHL, and now even more importantly, what the NBA was able to do. And whether it was Dana White, Adam Silver, or yes, even Gary Bettman, that was an example between testing, quarantining, isolation, social distancing, making sure that all of your talents and all of the crew and production people are not only safe, they are provided for, they are being looked after. There was also making sure that things were contained so that nothing spreads, if any, so that we wouldn't get many outbreak situations. We didn't see positive tests after positive tests pop up from here, from there, from everywhere. In fact, what we saw was, again, accountability and leadership, and even more. And I'm even more proud to say, as we saw the NBA season conclude with the Lakers winning the championship, that March, in the entire 3-month span of the NBA bubble, not one single positive test for COVID-19. That is an example of leadership and responsibility that we can strive to be. That unfortunately has been missing. We have been missing to see for the past few years now. So again, the theme I'm going to close this theme with my closing statement is recognize responsibility, recognize leadership. Make sure you're registered. Get out, get early, go vote.
Yeah, definitely. Darren, what's your closing statement?
And I love that closing statement, and I would like to say I went out and I voted today, absentee. I got out there early, and I totally agree. If you can and able to, get out, vote, make sure you vote. It's very important, and it's the most important election of our lifetime. Closing statement, I'm going to make it short and sweet. I want the Lions to lose out and draft Trevor Lawrence. Matt Stafford does not deserve to be on this franchise anymore. I want to see him with a competent franchise, fire the bozo and Patricia, get rid of Bob Quinn, tear it all down, come back next year with a GM giving them incentives to come to Detroit having the number 1 overall pick. Draft my man Trevor Lawrence, a.k.a. Ronnie Bass from Remember the Titans, and all I can say is a man can dream, right?
Yeah, and I can also dream that of a day where the Ford family no longer owns this team. But that ain't happening anytime soon. Exactly.
That's what I was going to get to, yeah.
Yeah, wake up.
Yeah, sell the team. Yep. My closing statement, I'm going to go with the Pistons here. The Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson era may be over, but one fact still remains. Tom Gores still owns the Pistons. And we just went over this long Tom Gores article. And I know he's a lunatic who doesn't deserve to be an owner of an NBA franchise team or any sports franchise because he, like Jeff Moss pointed out, may not even be a sports fan of any team. So that tells you that Tom Gores still overpays. Yeah, I know. There you go. So before we go, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new sports social networking app called VIG IT, which influences more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S. Download the Viget app and enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast Primetime Edition on Stables Media. We'll be back next week. For Ed Smith and Darren Weiss, on behalf of Frank Basner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Bon appetit. Hit 'em with a high. We rest our case. Stay safe.
The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there.